Welcome to Rise of the Rulelords Unchained. It's your subtle and spectacular Rulelord Pete here today with another special guest, Improphet, otherwise known as Joshua Birdsong. He's the writer for Sinclair's Library and Eldritch Osiris Games, but he's also been creating free Pathfinder 2e content every day for almost 2 years now. And it is now finally coming together in an exciting new Kickstarter project called Improphet's Tome. So welcome, Joshua.
Hi, thank you for having me.
I am so happy that you are finally compiling all of your stuff into a book. As some people who are part of the 2e subreddit know, Improphet has been doing this for a while now. I'm just going to start referring to you as Josh. You have been, it used to be your gimmick on the 2e subreddit to post something new. It was either every day or every week. You started with all of these weapons that you eventually compiled, and then just kept on going with different classes, different spells, until some dickbag moderator for the sub said you had to stop. Don't know who that was, but you did keep going in 2E Creations on Twitter and finally bringing it all together. So, the first thing I wanted to ask you is what got you started into just this spurt of creation?
Yeah, it actually started when I was first found out about Pathfinder 2e. Before that, like many other people, I was playing Dungeons and Dragons, and I was, I've been playing Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition for about 5 or 6 years, and I was like, I'm kind of done everything in Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition. Wanted to move on to something with the, I wanted to make some new characters, some new stuff. So I found Pathfinder, and I fell in love immediately. I loved a lot of the things about the system. But one thing when I first jumped in, I noticed that there wasn't like a massive amount of like homebrew creation online. Like I'm used to whenever I go to 5e, you can look up anything, and someone has made 5 different versions of that in homebrew already. And I noticed that was like a hole missing in the community. So I was like, you know what? Everyone says that if you want to like start something, just do it. So I was like, I'm gonna start making stuff. The first hole that I noticed for me was there was all these cool, unique weapons in the game that you could play as. But then if you go to like the specific magic weapons, there's like when I started, there was like maybe like 35 choices, and half of them were long swords.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No,
So
I feel that as a martial player, swords definitely have a big place in fantasy, but I'm someone who always likes to have something like cool and unique when on the rare occasions where I get to be a player. The one that I'm still missing is my beloved Dwarven Longhammer from first edition, which I'm keeping my fingers crossed is going to be showing up in the new treasury book. But yeah, I remember your 83 Forgotten Weapons post finally combining all of these things. Like, tell us, like, how did you figure out 83 unique stat blocks for weapons? I mean, I'm sure the combinations are there, but how did you go about making them where you felt satisfied that this wasn't just like some throwaway item, but something that someone would actually want to use in the game?
It was a really good project to start with because of that unique challenge. The challenge wasn't me having to like master the game, because I was still new to the game. I had only to master the whipping part of it, and then from there I could practice the creative part of the game and work with the mechanics and slowly learn them and incorporate them into new weapons. So as I was learning new things about the game, I could incorporate that into the weapons also. And Paizo also does a fantastic job of making all these weapons have their own unique personality built into the mechanics of the weapon. So some of the weapons, incorporated that uniqueness to them. Like, oh, this weapon has like reach and trip. That's what this weapon is about. I can incorporate that somehow. Maybe it does extra damage when you trip someone, and a lot of the weapons are also associated with specific deities. Like every deity has their favored weapon. And, why wouldn't there be a champion of this deity with this cool holy weapon that their god is blessed on?
Right.
Yeah, there's just a lot of opportunity for creativity in that. And it's like you tackle a challenge. Like all that. The project itself, the thesis was that I wanted to make a unique weapon for every weapon that doesn't already have a unique weapon for it. So like I didn't make anything for a longsword because longsword has enough love already. But
Yes, it does.
for everything else, I made one. So I made a big spreadsheet. I picked out all the weapons I was going to add. And in the middle of this process, of course, Paizo makes like 100 more new weapons that didn't make it onto the list.
Yeah.
But yeah, you tackle a project like that by just doing it one day at a time. Like one day you eat a whale one bite at a time. You just need to segment the project down into smaller pieces that are bite sized and just do it.
Yeah. And if you weren't there to see that, unfortunately, you probably don't know about all of these awesome weapons. But now you are making a Kickstarter and you're combining not just the weapons that you made, but you just kept going after those by making new feats, adding on to every single one of the core and advanced player guide classes, coming up with just all kinds of new things. So, like, when you were coming up with these new ones, like, talk about some of your favorites and, like, how you found gaps, I guess, that needed filling for every single one of the classes, or at least maybe not gaps, but like ways to improve them, let's say.
The thing about fantasy is that it is an infinitely broad spectrum of different ways to approach a problem. Like, oh, there's a wall in your way. Do I break it down with a firewall? Do I find a way to phase through that wall? Do I dig under the wall? It's like it's about actually many people say to think outside the box. It's really more about thinking within a box, and the more restrictions you can put on yourself, the easier it is to think of a solution to a problem. Like if I were to say like, hey, think of anything right now, your mind just like feels
anything.
Yeah, it's too big. You can't.
Yeah.
Brain freezes you. Now I would say like think of a gothic horror villain.
Right.
The box
Come up
helps
with your own brand new ancestry. Go.
Elephant.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like when I was coming up with the ancestry, the Giantkin, I wanted to create a box for myself. So I was like, I made a spreadsheet of every single ancestry already in the game, and I was like, what are the stats that are already represented? And it turns out like about half of more than half of the ancestries in the game start with a dexterity boost, and like a third of them will start with strength. So I was like, okay, if I was to add something to this, it would probably be most beneficial to add a new strength based ancestry into this. Let's find some combinations that aren't currently being utilized. And then from there, I added a restriction to myself so then that I'm not going to come up with a Giantkin class. And I was like, okay, we need another small dexterous ancestry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Giantkin is actually one of the ones that stuck out to me when looking over the many different projects that you've worked on that you're including. I kind of want to dig a little bit more into that. Like, so what is special about your Giantkin and what keeps it balanced within the game? Because I kind of figure one of the reasons it hasn't been included is because it'd be very hard to keep balanced within the bounds of the game, where you're probably going to have a player starting off as large at first level, which could be a challenge for a GM to work against. So what went into building the Giantkin?
Well, that's the thing. They don't start off large at first level.
Interesting.
I worked around the whole problem. So Giantkin are not true giants. They don't start off as large, but they can grow into it. Much like someone would develop wings, they will start off with like baby steps where maybe it can fly like for one turn for once a day until eventually they can do it for an hour, and then eventually they're just like permanently flying. I do that similar momentum of ancestry feats building up to permanent giantness.
Okay, so you kind of followed the same outline as other ancestries that build up to a shtick of some kind.
Absolutely. And of course, there's lots of flavors of giants. There's all the traditional cloud, cyclops, fire, frost, Goliath, rune giants, storm giants, and trolls also, and all of them come with their own unique ancestry features that are available. Like trolls can eventually get like regeneration and breathing fire, and all the fun elemental giant things are in there as well. And of course, one of their core abilities that all giants are known for is throwing rocks. So rock throw is built into the core mechanic of the Giantkin.
Oh, cool. I like that.
Yep.
A couple of other things that you have on here that are pretty unique is the pacifist
Yes.
options
Hmm.
that you have. It's hard to imagine Pathfinder without combat.
Yeah.
Just being a either a social campaign or a totally pacifist one. So
Yes.
tell us a bit about your pacifist options
Hmm.
and how that keeps the game going.
Yeah, so the pacifist options kind of break down in a couple of different ways. Pacifism doesn't necessarily mean that like I will just not participate in this fight, but maybe you go about participating in a fight in a way that you're not hurting anyone, or you're trying to help your allies and opposed to detriment an enemy. So I added some skill options to use diplomacy in different ways. I added some abilities that instead of increasing the damage of your allies, maybe you just reduce the overall damage people are going to take in this combat to make the combat less dangerous. And things such as that, and they're going to be pretty well incorporated into the rest of this because there isn't going to be like a pacifist chapter in the book, but like the options will be like the skill options will be in the skill section, the spell options will be entangled in with the rest of the spell options in the book. But I thought I know a lot of people. I've played a lot of different role playing games with a lot of different people on like big servers of players, and there are so many character concepts where it's like I just want to be like a guy who goes in there and tries to like stop fights from happening, or I want to I don't want to actually hurt anyone. Even if we do have to
Sure.
fight, I'll just be in the back healing or something. And this gives you like a
Right.
more dynamic way to participate in fights, that isn't just spamming heal the whole time.
Yes. And I totally get that. I'm the kind of GM who loves it when my players are able to, not just able to, but actively want to find a way to fix a problem without instantly going into combat. In fact, one of my biggest GM pet peeves is when players decide to go instantly to violence
Yep.
or intimidation or something like that. It's like it's so boring and overplayed. So
Yeah.
I'm really glad that these are included and are going to be available to people. But you've also got each individual class
Yeah.
expanded upon. Room of Rangers,
Yeah.
Cleric Crew, Deluge of Druids. First off, I love the alliteration that you have with the
it's
names.
it's really funny because I just started doing it and I never stopped, and I just thought it was a fun thing to do when I did it. And then someone messaged me once on either Reddit or Twitter, but they were like, "Hey, I wanted to make some stuff for Pathfinder, and I kind of wanted to do some alliteration in the name. Would that be all right? I don't want to steal your brand." And I was like, "Yeah, go for it. I didn't invent alliteration."
No, but
Yeah.
it is really cool. So like
Mhm.
Inkling of Investigators,
Yeah.
tell us a bit about your class improvements. What are some of the things that players who are playing the core
Mhm.
classes of Pathfinder are going to get out of your materials?
They're gonna get more. And every class is like there isn't one approach to make new content for each class because every class functions completely differently. They don't all fall under like the same subclass grouping that 5e does. Like cleric was a really challenging one because there's only two examples. You have cloistered and you have a war cleric. So I was like, oh well, the more examples you have, the better you can balance things against Paizo,
Sure.
and that was a challenging one. Another particularly challenging one was the investigator, because there's not the investigator. I'm thinking of the swashbuckler. So the swashbuckler was exceptionally challenging because all of theirs are built around a particular skill that's used in combat, and they covered most of them with the ones they released. So
So like
hmm?
for the swashbucklers, so
Yes.
how'd you get past that?
I had to get creative. The ones I came up with, I only came up with two for this one, which was a rather small amount for what I normally do. But I came up with the skill action of trick magic item as the one that gets it. So they're called the magical hacker. So they can get
Mm.
panache by tricking magic items in combat.
Ooh, interesting.
Yeah.
Tricking them.
Mm-hmm. And then the other one I call it the schemer, and this one uses crafting and plant snares in combat, and they can get panache by getting enemies to trigger their snares.
Ooh, interesting. Yeah, I like those
Yeah, so that one's
increases.
about like setting up the battlefield and working with teammates to try to get that panache off, and setting in kind of like a MacGyvering a plan to have it like if it comes together perfectly, it'll be so awesome. And that's how you get your panache by coming up with some convoluted plan of of snares and traps and environmental hazards.
I'm thinking of Scooby-Doo and how they always came up with really
Yep.
intricate traps that 100% never worked out.
Nope.
But still, that's
Yeah.
pretty cool. I like that because you typically wouldn't think of traps as being anything outside, the domain of really like, the ranger.
Yeah.
So that's interesting that you got it incorporated into the swashbuck. But like, what are a couple of your favorites of all of these? And like, tell us about them.
I have always loved barbarians. Barbarians have always been one of my favorites, and that is one of the reasons I chose it to be one of the example pages. And that's one of the first ones I did too. The barbarians. I love barbarians. And one of my favorite ended up being the which is the showcase, the example ones. If you go to my Kickstarter, you can actually see this one. It's the primal barbarian, which everyone wants to play a barbarian that can cast spells. It's something that, like, if you put a restriction on a class, like, hey, this class can do all these things, but it can't do this one thing, every player will want to find a way to do that one thing with the class.
Sure.
So I did not give the barbarian spells. Instead, I gave them spell-like abilities they can do while raging. And I gave them one of the key features with this is they don't do as much damage on hit with their rage, but they can instead, once per rage, do a spell-like ability. It's called a primal surge, where they burst forth this elemental power based on their primal instinct. And it can be done with 1, 2, or 3 actions, and the damage that you're losing from your rage comes out through this expression. So you can either do it as a touch, as a range of a single target within 30 feet, or as a 30-foot cone if you use 3 actions.
Right.
And it deals D6 plus rage damage, and that increases by a D6 every 2 levels.
Oh, interesting.
So it scales with your level and with your rage damage.
I kind of pictured a Dragon Ball Z scream.
Yeah.
That time.
And they can get all sorts of feats too. Like they can get a once per rage heal. They can get an ability where they can refuel themselves to do these again if they need to at a higher level. And then they can get all sorts of ways to amplify their raging spell-like abilities with their feats.
Ooh. All right. So spellcasting. Well,
yeah,
not technically.
No, not technically spellcasting. They don't get the diversity of all 500 spells in the game, but they can do spell-like effects for sure. They can trick someone into thinking they're casting a spell.
Well, that definitely fills a niche, I think. So that's one more point towards your book. But you're not just adding on to the ones that we already know and love. You are coming up with your own, though it's not technically your own. It's existed for a while, but it's also kind of a fan favorite. It's the Warlock, which many people know is a class that exists in 5e, but has not been brought over to Pathfinder 2e in an official capacity for whatever reason. So tell us, what is a Warlock? What's the niche that it fits? And what's the fantasy of playing one?
The traditional Warlock will be the character who has made a deal with the devil to gain some kind of power, and now, oh no, I have this power, but now I regret this deal kind of situation, which comes up in so many different fantasy tropes. There's always some kind of like, oh, I gain power at a cost. And unlike the witch, you know what this cost is. You have this sword hanging over your head, and you know you made a mistake. This isn't a mysterious god of healing that's leading your path somehow, or some kind of grand unknown thing that you would get with the witch. This is a contract that you've signed, and you've dotted the I's, crossed the T's, and you know what's coming for you. So you better make use of this power while you got it. And that is the draw to the Warlock. That is the fantasy.
It comes with a bunch of different packs for each of those ones. So Celestial, Fathomless, Fey.
Yeah.
And each one of them has a reward and a punishment.
Yeah.
So tell us a bit about those.
So this is for the more RP side of this, and this isn't optional rules. These are very similar to the deity options that are in Gods and Magic. Whereas if you're doing deeds in favor of your deity, they will give you some kind of small boon or some and if you're doing things against it, they can enact some kind of bane against you. And this functions the same way, where if you're upholding the deals of the tenets of your pact or doing what they say, this is the way that if a GM is looking for a way to like, wow, they made this contract but they're just like actively going against them in every single way, is there anything I can do to deter the player somehow from just like completely ignoring this massive part of their character?
Right.
And that's where the punishments and rewards come in. And like I said, this is entirely optional. But if a GM is looking for something, instead of just having something that they need to make out of thin air on the spot, they can refer to this as some examples. And there's, of course, minor, moderate, and major rewards and punishments for each of them. And there's
that is fascinating mechanic, especially because it's more for the GM
yeah,
than the player.
yes,
I love it.
This is not something that a player should be able to plan around. And I have like a 3-paragraph thing at the beginning explaining how it should be used and when it should be used and whatnot.
Yeah. And one of the biggest parts about the Warlock is the Eldritch Blast,
Yes.
which is the first thing that it gets as a first level cantrip.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to talk about that.
Yes.
But I also want to bring up that your Warlock functions what looks like to me a lot like how the Magus
mm-hmm.
and the Summoner do, where you're not just going to keep on compounding spells after spell after spell.
Yes.
You've only got a certain amount that you're going to get access to at each level, and you're going to lose
mm-hmm.
access to lower level stuff as you heighten. So tell us about the Eldritch Blast and how the Warlock's spellcasting works.
Yeah, so like you said, it is the bounded spellcasting. You've seen the Magus and the Summoner, asterisks, and we'll get to that asterisk later. They do have some benefits, because these, unlike the Magus and the Summoner, they have something else that's like dramatically increasing their damage output to make up for that fact. They have either like a giant animal companion that's doing a ton of things, or they have like equally proficient melee options and spell strikes and whatnot that they can do. This doesn't have either of those two things. It does get a very cool cantrip and lots of cool ways to buff that cantrip, and that is the Eldritch Blast cantrip. Like you said, it and also they get spellcasting proficiency a little bit faster than normal spellcasters. So their cantrips are going to be more potent than other spellcasters, because they'll be hitting more often with it.
Right.
And they can make better use of the small resources they have. But the Eldritch Blast cantrip, that's where the money is at. And it is very, very similar to the 5th edition iteration of it. It's going to shoot out multiple different beams. You make a different attack roll for each one of them. Each one does 1d4 force damage, and all of them they all add to your multiple attack penalty, but you don't apply it until after all attacks have been made. You start with 2, and then every 2 spell levels you get another bolt.
Okay. So what's that look like then? What's like a famous warlock that someone might think about when they're playing this class?
Oh, it's a famous warlock. Oh, they're everywhere in media, but man, I can only think of right now the most recent book series I read. I do a lot of fantasy reading. That's where I get a lot of inspiration from. I finished the Lycanius trilogies, which starts with the Shadow of What Was Lost. One of the main characters there, I would say, definitely made a deal with something somewhat unintentionally, but it gave them some tremendous powers. Oh man, it's hard to talk about this because I don't want to spoil anything, but I gave the example and immediately regretted it. It's a fantastic book series. I highly recommend it. But yeah, he made a deal with something that he thought may have been a god. And it gave him a lot of cool powers, but boy, did it come at a cost. And it also, he had to deal with all the other people who were also getting cool powers because of this deal that was made. And yeah, the Eldritch Blast shooting like a ton of bolts at someone is just like, it's a really like almost magic missile-y kind of fantasy where you're shooting a ton of missiles every single turn. And it's just it plays it's very fun to roll a lot of dice and to make a lot of attacks. If you're doing Eldritch Blast, I recommend doing all your attack rolls at once if you're targeting one person, just to speed it up a little bit. But it's a lot of fun. And there's lots of different ways to modify it, increase it, and to edit it, similar to how you can do it in 5th edition.
So the Eldritch Blast is a cantrip. It has heightened, so it's going to increase naturally as people go on. But you've also got a lot of different feats that attach onto it. So, how's the Eldritch Blast going to improve as player levels up?
Yeah. So right off the bat, you have ways to make your Eldritch Blast unique with whatever pack you take. Say if you were to take the Celestial pack, you can choose to have your Eldritch Blast do positive damage, which, Force is always very good, but sometimes you want to trigger that weakness. Or you just want to be flavorful, shooting out blasts of positive energy. But they can also be modified in other ways, such as via feat and invocations, which are a very, very fun mechanic that allows you to customize your warlock to fit whatever playstyle you want to do. And you can totally double down on, I want to shoot cantrips and I want them to be the best cantrips in the world. There are also lots of other options you can do with that. One example would be the Forceful Blast feat at 4th level, which allows you to have the option that if you target a single creature with all of your Eldritch Blasts, you can push them back 5 feet whenever you hit them.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and there's all sorts of little ones. At 6th level, every single pact will get a unique feat that they can take that will allow them to trigger some kind of extra effect with their Eldritch Blast, almost like a meta magic that only applies to Eldritch Blast.
Mm-hmm.
Such as Grasp of the Unrelenting Sea for the Fathomless Pact allows them to cast Eldritch Blast, and then it will give them a chance to restrain them, and like as your Eldritch Blast almost become like tentacles that come out and wrap around them.
Very nice. So there's definitely a big difference between the feats and the invocations. So tell us about the invocation mechanic. That seems similar to like the unique mechanics of other classes of this very specialized thing that they get. So how do those work?
Yeah. So anyone who's played 5th edition or played a warlock knows that the coolest thing about the warlock is the invocations and the ability to customize your warlock to be whatever you want it to be. Unfortunately, their invocation system is almost exactly like the feat system in Pathfinder that every class has access to. So everyone gets to be unique. But so I wanted to give them something else that makes them different with their invocations. And the path I went down is core proficiencies. So the general warlock has very low core proficiencies compared to other things. It will get saving throws upgrades, and its armor will increase once, and that's about all they're going to get. So what you can do with your invocations is you can specialize your warlock. You can take a bunch of weapon training ones to eventually get up to masters and weapons at 18th level if you spec down that tree and get all sorts of attack opportunity and things such as that. You could go down a defensive one if you wanted bulkier armor. You could get more spell slots. You could be there's a set called the Eldritch Conduits that you can get that will allow you to pick one occult spell at a certain level and cast it twice per day without expending any spell slots. There's also ways to improve your skill proficiencies. There's a line of skill proficiency boosting ones if you wanted to be a very versatile, skill heavy caster. And there are even ways that you can use these invocations to create special items, Eldritch focuses, that can give you item bonuses to cantrip attacks and cantrip damage.
So now I was talking with Vanessa Hoskins about her kineticist class. She mentioned the warlock a lot, and seemed like there were a lot of similarities between the Eldritch Blast and the kineticist's key blast, or I forget exactly what it was called. But essentially, you're both doing blasts, improving them, the kineticist gate. So how is your warlock going to stay, true to the class and unique to Paizo's kineticist?
Yeah, I think this is going to be quite different in a couple of different ways. The first one being that the way that they're approaching the kineticist almost seems to be like from a martial first perspective, and this is definitely coming from a casting first perspective. And I believe Vanessa even brought that up as the difference between her kineticist and the kineticist that is being built by Paizo, is that hers is more of a caster and Paizo's is more of a martial. And that's going to be the first primary one. And the second one is just going to be the general flavor of the class altogether. It's almost the difference between a druid and a bard or a witch. It's your spells are going to be a little bit weirder and not so much the elemental sense and a much more of the occult sense of the world. I think this class will be a bit more similar to a psychic than it would be a kineticist.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and I built this before the psychic came out, but Yeah, I think it'll be a similar playstyle in a different flavor.
Gotcha. Well, cool. I'm sure that there's a lot of people coming from 5e who discovered the light of Pathfinder Second Edition. Might be listening to that Warlock, and you're going to be filling in that gap for them. So that's really, really. But we're hoping that you can actually go a little bit further than that with your Kickstarter if you can hit some stretch goals. So looking at it right now, depending on how well you do, you're going to start adding options to all of the classes that have been introduced in books after the Advanced Player's Guide. Magus,
Yes.
Gunslinger, Inventor, Psychic, Thaumaturge. So tell us a little bit about what people might be able to expect from those classes if we can get those stretch goals.
Yeah. So I have strategically stayed away from these classes for quite some time now in anticipation of the Kickstarter stretch goals. But I have a couple of ideas floating around for them. But these are one of the things where I don't know what I'm gonna write till I sit down and I start writing them.
Gotcha.
And I have some interesting ideas for the Inventor for sure. That's one I really wanted to play around with, but I've held myself back for the people and for the Kickstarter. But I'm very excited about the opportunity to finally dive into these classes. I've done a massive crash course on Summoner recently also because I had a player in one of my campaigns who wanted to play a Summoner, and I was like, okay, time to get out the book and actually learn how this class works. I'd probably be adding some mounted options that are more additive than what the Summoner already has, because they have very limited options for actually making mounted combat not a horrible idea.
And that's something I could see a lot of people wanting to do. You got this awesome Pokemon-like creature. Of course, you're gonna want to ride it.
You want to ride the dragon?
Yeah. Me personally, I'm someone who's been really wanting to try out the Gunslinger. Do you have any previews for that one?
So let's see. We have the sword and gun. We have the Gunslinger. We have the sniper, and we have the shotgun. Why not get a rocket launcher in there?
Ooh. Okay.
I like big boom. I'm a barbarian player. I want things to go boom.
I dig it. Well, awesome. Well, we really hope that you can reach both your goal as well as the stretch goals. And again, the project is called Improphet's Tome. It's available on Kickstarter. I'm going to have links in the description below. I really hope that you all will go support it. I'm a big fan of Improphet's work, again, because all of the stuff that he was doing in the 2e community, well before most of these 2e Kickstarters started going, before Pathfinder Infinite even. So it's cool to finally have a way to collect all of these things in one book rather than, needing to find Improphet's profile pages and stalk through all of his pictures and post history on Reddit. So I'm really hopeful to get a book into my hands. But if people want to, find more of you, look up more of your projects, where can they find you? And, what can you tell them about other work?
Yeah, the easiest place to find me will probably be Twitter. I'm at Improphet with a 0 instead of an O. The 0 was the O was taken, so I had to settle with a 0.
Oh, what a jerk.
But other than that, I'm on the various Pathfinder 2e creations Reddit, and I'm on several different Pathfinder Discord, but the Twitter would be the easiest place to find me. And yeah, if you want to find any of my work, about once a week or so, when I finish a project, I will post the project and a link to my entire catalog of public work, and that would be the easiest place to find it. You could also scroll through my feed and find one of the previous projects I've done that for. And yeah, some of the stuff I've been working on is I've been writing for St. Clair's Library, which is Nonat's Kickstarter book that's coming out. It's almost done. We're getting there. There's a lot of writing been going on by a lot of very talented people, and I'm honored to be a part of that project.
Yeah.
I also write for Eldritch Osiris Games, and I do some freelance work every now and then. So you might see my name in a credit somewhere.
That would be cool. Here's hoping that you get into some Paizo official stuff pretty soon.
Oh, I know. I've been waiting for the email.
One day it's gonna come. I know it. But I'm so glad that you were able to come onto the podcast, talk to us about this. I'm glad again that you have this project going on. And again, I really hope that you, the listener, will go on and back it because it's a really cool project, a really cool third-party content creator, and I really want to support them whenever they get going. One of the ways that we're doing that as the 2E subreddit pretty soon will be with Third Party Con. Stands for, well, TPK is what the initials for it are. It is essentially going to be the PaizoCon of third-party content. We're going to have a streaming schedule where we're going to have a series of co-hosts talking to different content creators, freelancers, bloggers, producers, all of that stuff, where you'll be able to hear about their projects, what went into them, how they went and made them, just like podcasts. And we're also going to have a play section where you'll be able to try out different Pathfinder 2e third-party classes, skills, feats, items, and for GMs, monsters, as well as different adventures that some of these people have produced. So that might be a very good time to come and try out one of these different class features, or maybe even the Warlock from Improphet's Tome. But until next session,
don't let the rules rule you.